I'm not going to give you a lecture or read a paper. You've had a chance to read the essay Metapictures, and I thought we would mainly focus on that, but other concepts as well. So I want you to feel like this is your chance to ask whatever questions you want. They can be of any kind, abstract about general ideas, but also I think it's often very helpful to go to something particular, to a passage, to a keyword, or a specific picture. Am I doing something to make little sounds come out? One thing I should say about Metapictures is that the essay was actually written quite a long time ago. It was published in the early 1990s. So do the math, it's 30 years old. But it seems to have reached a kind of maturity. The concept, as I laid it out in that essay, was fairly restricted. I defined three kinds of metapictures: what I called the strict picture, which tries to show itself. You have a picture, and inside of it, you have a duplicate of the same picture. The best example was something I learned in graduate school about an idea called the mise en abîme, the endless regress where you seem to go deeper and deeper into a picture. And the famous example was a cereal box, the Quaker Oats box. On the Quaker Oats box was a picture of a Quaker with his hat, and the Quaker was holding in his hand a Quaker Oat box. And that box that he was holding in his hand, of course, had a picture of a Quaker. And the Quaker on that pictured box was also holding a Quaker Oats box. So at the breakfast table, my sisters and I would look at the Quaker Oats box and say, where does it end? And of course, finally at the end, there was a little dot that represented the Quaker. It vanished into the infinite. So one of the things I want to stress about metapictures is they don't have to be works of art. They can be something in a newspaper. They could be something in a magazine. Yesterday, if you were there for the at the Marionette Museum, you may have noticed I think they're called ex-voto pictures. Those all involve a scene of illness and then a scene of the cure of the illness in a cloud inside the picture. So it's as if we're always seeing double, and that once we see double, then 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 4 is 16. There's an inevitable tendency for the picture to open up a world that you don't see the end of it. You may see a horizon, but it goes very deep into our consciousness. So in the essay I wrote back in the 90s, I defined 3 kinds: what I call the strict self-reference, exemplified by Saul Steinberg. This wonderful picture. In which we see the picture as it were drawing itself, coming into existence, and the person who made the picture is there inside of it. But that in some ways was my starting point. It's the first thing I thought of. One reason I love the idea of the metapicture is that you can take any ordinary picture and ask yourself the question, in what sense does this picture comment on itself, refer to itself? how does it display its own self-knowledge? It's also a way of thinking about theory, which tends to be very abstract. You know, we talk about what is an image, what is a picture, what is a spectator, what is a reader and a beholder, what is the spectator of a film. The metapicture tends to make it concrete. So you start instead with an abstraction, a question. You say, okay, here's an example. You go to something concrete. I think it's always good when you are trying to puzzle over some very big question, find a thing, an object, a particular image to go with it. So as you can see, this is another metapicture, but we don't get to see the picture. We get to see the artist, the cartoonist, who is at his drawing board. So sometimes what we see is the artist at work. And the Metapictures essay I wrote in the 1990s, it only had the three types, plus what I want to say is the picture of the invisible, the Mad Magazine image. Yesterday, Professor Cometa raised the question, how do pictures render the invisible? How do they show us what we can't see? And the answer is many of them do that. Once you ask that question, you notice pictures refer to many things that they don't show. So in this one, the Trump cartoon does not appear. In fact, it never will, because the cartoonist has been told it's too late. You were going to make fun of this, and now it has already happened. The picture is too late. It has no effect. There's also, since we're for the moment on the topic of invisibility, this picture appears as a cover of one of my books, and it's also on my website. It's a picture by an Israeli photographer named Mickey Kratzman. And it's a picture of a wall, a security wall that protects a settlement in the West Bank from the Palestinian village in the distance. The village is called Gilo. The settlement is called Bar Ilan. And the story behind this picture was the Israeli settlers felt two things which were contradictory. One, we feel endangered by the Palestinians across the valley. Sometimes they shoot at us. So we have to build a security wall to protect ourselves. But then they felt the opposite thing. We love the view. We like to see that village because it makes us feel like we are in the Holy Land. It's one of the terrible paradoxes of Israeli culture, both the love of the land on the one hand, and the distrust and suspicion of the inhabitants, the indigenous inhabitants of the land. This has been true of colonized spaces forever. It was true in the United States, the relationship to the Indians, to the Native Americans, both loved and hated at the same time. There's nothing like conquering people, colonizing them, to produce ambivalence. You say, oh, I want their land, and I want them to behave. I want them to be nice. But if you've taken their land, probably they're not going to be. Interesting little fact about this painting, it was done by some recent Israeli immigrants who were trained in the School of Socialist Realism. So they were brought in, and a young Israeli scholar wrote a thesis about this wall, saying it's the socialist realist painters came and they said, we didn't know we would be asked to do this kind of thing. And what they were being asked to do was to simultaneously make something visible, that is the scene, the scenery, and invisible, namely the real place. How can you have both? Well, this picture shows you how you can have both. So it also shows us something that we don't often think about. How do pictures render something invisible? How do they conceal something at the same time they reveal something? Very important kind of question. So I've taken this concept of metapictures, and as you can see, it exploded in recent years, partly as a result of an exhibition that was commissioned in China. A gallery, art gallery, which is called the Overseas Contemporary Art Terminal, has galleries in 10 cities in China. They asked me if I would make an exhibition of metapictures. And then they made a parallel exhibition of Chinese metapictures, restricting it to the 20th century. I can't show you that exhibition, but basically, that's where this Pretzi came from. These pictures were all printed on very nice paper, and then they were displayed 4 different ways. A part of what makes a picture what it is where does the picture appear? How is it hung on a wall? Does it appear in a newspaper? Where is it? That's part of what the question of the metapicture raises, not just what's in the picture, but what's around it, what's its context. And pictures within pictures bring their own context along. So as you can see, my 3 types, they were all basically contained in that first cloud. Dialectical images, I sort of changed the meaning of that to go from the ambiguous multi-stable image. I divided the multi-stable image, you remember these, the duck rabbit being the most famous one, and this being Wittgenstein's use of the duck rabbit. It's the simplest possible. Is it a duck or is it a rabbit? Why would a philosopher like Wittgenstein devote 50 pages to meditating on this image? I think it's because he said this is really the fundamental mystery or paradox of images. They always present us with a contradiction or with a doubleness at any rate. Is it this or that? Is it a picture of something, or is it itself something, an object, a material thing in the world? This is especially strange when we say now, what am I looking at here? I am looking at a very simple pencil drawing, which Ludwig Wittgenstein drew on a piece of paper. But I'm also looking at a copy of that, and I'm looking at it on a screen in this room in Palermo. So the picture moves from its origin point to its reception point. So we're looking at it here and now. Wittgenstein, a long way from us. But does his thought come with it? We hope so. But maybe also thoughts he didn't think. We have to ask ourselves, what thoughts come to us in relation to this? It's like the famous, another great example of the metapicture, which doesn't appear in the exhibition, is the Rorschach test, the ink blot, where you look at an accidental thing. There's a splash of something, and you look at it and say, that reminds me. Here's what I see in that. Or one of my favorite cartoon strips in the old days was Peanuts, where Charlie Brown and his friends, they lie on the ground and they look at the sky. And Lucy, who is always the skeptic, she has Schroeder, who is the intellectual, and Charlie Brown, who's just an ordinary little boy. He says, looking at the clouds, says, Schroeder, what do you see in the clouds? And Schroeder looks and he says, I see a tableau of the Apostle Paul preaching to the converted. And there is a Roman soldier standing on the left. And he says, oh, that's very good, Schroeder. Charlie Brown, what do you see? Charlie Brown says, I was going to say I saw a ducky and a horsey, but now I'm not so sure. He's embarrassed. He doesn't see enough. So projection is a key part of pictures. I have shown this. I mean, are any of you here unable to see either a duck or a rabbit? Don't be shy. Can you? Anybody who can't see both?
Who can see both?
Anybody who?
Chi vede entrambi?
You don't. Which one don't you see?
I see both.
You see both. Okay. So I mean, maybe you're too well trained. Sometimes when you have people who haven't seen it before, they say,
yeah.
What are you talking about? I don't. And usually the answer is, everybody sees the duck. And I would like to know why. But some people have a harder time seeing the rabbit. So there it is. A few years ago, I asked the artist, Robert Morris, I said, you are a sculptor. You make bodies. So make for me a drawing of the duck rabbit with a body. I want to know what it looks like. And this was his answer. He said, the answer is simple. It's what a sculptor calls contrapposto. You have to make the figure appear to turn its head. And that way you see the rabbit. If it's leaning back like this, you see the duck. So another purpose of Metapictures then was simply to make you see how wonderful images are, to kind of get away from the notion, oh, it's all self-evident, there's nothing to see here, move on, everything is fine. And also how an image, under certain circumstances, can become a very serious question. I love this particular cartoon. There can be no peace until they renounce their rabbit god and accept our duck god. This is what human beings fight wars over: images, over whose image is going to be dominant. If you were at my lecture yesterday, you saw a picture of Vladimir Putin with the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, with bombs exploding in the distance and them shaking hands because their duck god they regard as superior to the Iranian, the Ukrainian rabbit god. So images can become national symbols, sacred, totemic. This, of course, is the obscene version when the duck and rabbit get into a carnal relationship that's kind of monstrous and illegal. So multi-stable images, those were always part of what I felt we need to reckon with. And in some sense, every image is multi-stable, because on the one hand, it's just a piece of paper with some marks on it. On the other hand, it's an illusion in which we project and find something that is not there, but appears to be there. So very fundamental to the whole idea of image making. So I don't want to try to survey all of these examples. one of the most mysterious, yesterday at the Marionette Museum, I was looking at the most primitive faces. In order to make a face appear on a piece of board, all you need is three elements: a pair of elements, a single vertical element, and then a horizontal element: eyes, nose, mouth. So the face seen in a cloud, or the idea of the face as something that looks back at you. Many pictures look back at you. You look at them and you would hesitate to deface them, to cut into them. One of the first exercises we ever tried at my university to get students to understand the magic of pictures is to say, bring in a picture of somebody you care about, picture of your mother, of your sister. Okay, take out the picture now and take a pair of scissors and cut it up. No one will do it. We are just as superstitious about images as we ever were. They have something in them. They have a soul. And you can say, oh, what? That's I don't believe that, but then I would challenge you. Okay, pull out that picture in your wallet or your purse of someone you love and tear it up. It's not possible. So where shall I stop and let you talk? So many other places we could go, and but I want you to lead me, and it can be in this labyrinth, this atlas of pictures, or it can be outside of it, perhaps something that's not here. Because one thing I need to emphasize, this is not a complete atlas. It's a progress report on a concept, which started 30 years ago with a few examples and now has mutated into many more. So why don't I stop there and open the floor, let you ask questions, bring up examples you'd like to discuss.
So, please, Forza,
Yes.
please.
Morning.
Please stand up and introduce yourself very briefly, of course.
Good morning. I'm Georgia and I'm an educator and pedagogist. But my last thesis have focused on the trauma and self-right. So yesterday you talked about seeing through madness, but another emergency of our epoch is the trauma. That is not madness, but it's such a normal human condition that plug us all in this reality. So do you think visual culture and so narrations could be not only an aesthetic lens, but also a personal or collective cure in so many contexts like education? Thanks.
The answer is yes. But I want to respond to the terms of your question a little bit. First, trauma and madness. I think it's important to keep the distinction in mind, but trauma, of course, can lead to madness. We have a thing called post-traumatic stress syndrome, PTSD, particularly prevalent in soldiers returning from war, who have often they are possessed by images, by memories, things that happened that they dream about, that keep them awake at night, that they can't get out of their heads. And it's a huge part of psychotherapy. What you do with a trauma victim to deal with the memory images. How can you, allow them to be opened up so they can go away? Of course, Freud was the great master of this. He believed that the talking cure, if you could verbalize the image, that would drain the magic away. Maybe sometimes for some people. It's not, there's no all-purpose cure, I think. No one thing you can do. But it's clear that we are the kind of creatures who carry images with us, especially the things that impress us. And sometimes they can produce obsession, or we can feel possessed by them. And the question is, what do we do with that? And by the way, this is something we share with animals, I think. Particularly the canine branch of animals. Dogs have very vivid memories. And if you strike a dog, it never forgets. Just one time is enough. So you have to be very careful not to produce that image. There are also images which seem traumatic on the face of them. That is, they are pictures of terrible things, of wounds themselves, of people who have been wounded. The images coming out of Ukraine are very difficult to look at. War produces a whole range of images of bodies. Recently, I saw a picture in the New York Times of a muddy field with a burned out tank and the bodies of Russian soldiers scattered all around it, emerging with the mud. I could barely look at it. So it's a very important part of image theory, and it's one reason I always emphasize the picture is not just something to be looked at, it's something that may or may not impress us. Of course, we're surrounded by so many images everywhere, television, advertising, and so forth. So we become kind of numb, but every once in a while, one of them breaks through, and an image can produce a trauma in itself, in the sense that it hurts our feelings. That, I think, would be maybe the mildest level. And one thing we need to do is give ourselves a certain amount of armor. If you're going to be an image scientist, you need to know how to look with discrimination. It's partly, I think, a learned skill. What am I looking for? What am I looking at? Why? And how does it affect me? Am I missing something? Or is something coming to me and I'm not aware of it? So it's a fundamental question. I mean, images, it's true that there are words that wound also, insults. Now we have some words we're not supposed to say. George Carlin, my favorite comedian, used to recite, what was it, the 7 words you cannot say on television, and then he would say them. Same thing with images. Sometimes there'd be an image that's damaging or traumatic, but if you put it in the right frame, then it's possible to look. You produce a framework around it. So, very important subject. We could talk about that, nothing but that, images and trauma, and for a very long time.
Any other question?
Hi,
Please introduce it. Yes, it is for all the other.
thank you so much for this lecture.
And it is also a pleasure to know that a person like Tom Mitchell like comics. For me, a comic book is really nice to hear. And I have a question regarding this book.
Yes.
Because I'm doing a PhD and I'm studying atlas of images, and actually with the focus in Gerhard Richter. And you start this book putting Gerhard Richter. And then the first essay is about cloning terror and the image of the World Trade Center. And I have a question like, did you have in mind the artwork of Richter when you wrote this book? Were you maybe inspired by it, or was just like random as a choice?
But by which?
By the September 11th.
The September 11th.
Because some years later, Robert Storr wrote a book about it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was reading it, I remember your book, and it was like kind of validation.
Yeah.
And I was really curious about that.
Yeah. I don't think the World Trade Center disaster, that was more in the sphere of trauma. Of course, and it was the creation of a deliberately traumatic image, the destruction of the World Trade Center. And this relates to the topic of iconoclasm. Sometimes the destruction of an image is just as important or even more important than the creation of it. Certainly the defacement of a picture, what I was just talking about with, cutting up the picture of a loved one, but also destroying a public image. In my study of the Roman emperors, famously Caligula decapitated Jupiter and put his own head on it. But I don't think that was what led me first into the question of what they want. It was more about love, and the idea that before there's iconoclasm, which is usually comes out of the hatred of an image, the fear of it, somebody has to love it. I grew up a Catholic boy, and in some ways I'm still a fall-away Catholic. So I've never gotten over the kind of mystery of images in the Catholic religion. And one of the things that we learned as altar boys was to make a distinction between the adoration of images and the veneration. I'm sure most of you are Italians. You probably grew up with this distinction. It's okay to venerate. It's wrong to adore. And the adoration means that you put too much into the image. You put too much love and life into it, so it becomes something magical. But the problem is, and then veneration is moderate. It's like affection as opposed to passion. Moderate love, extreme love. But how do you draw the line? I think this is why the Reformation, the Protestant Revolution, was so vehement. No, neither veneration nor adoration. Because it's a slippery slope. Once you start venerating, pretty soon you will adore. And then you will be guilty of idolatry. This was always the Protestant objection to Roman Catholicism, that the images are too important. They are loved too much. And so people give up their rationality, give up their autonomy, and project life into the image. The image needs to be adored. It wants something from me. So that was the kind of, in my own background, my sense of what do pictures want really meant. When I had my first communion, I was given a little missal with in the cover, it had a tiny plastic sculpture of the Madonna. And I remember when I was 7 years old, looking at that missal and with my finger stroking the Madonna and feeling like this must be doing something really good for me. And I think that's not a sickness or a terrible thing. I think it's one of the normal things people do with images. They do fall in love with them. They do adore them. It's one of the things that happens, especially with works of art. They develop aura, what Walter Benjamin called a kind of magic halo around them, which is much more important than the price. But price can also do, if I show you an object and I say this is a work of art, and I'll sell it to you for $10, and this is another work of art and it'll cost you $1 million. You know which one is going to have aura attached to it. The aura of what's Marx called commodity fetishism. One of the diagrams that might be useful in thinking about this is this triad of concepts. Not that one, no. It's the idol, the fetish, and the totem. Where is that? Did I not put it in here? Maybe I didn't. Okay. Whoops. One of the chapters in What Do Pictures Want, there's a section called Idol, Fetish, Totem. And it's about 3 ways that we fall in love with images. The idol is the one of absolute, the image becomes God. It's identified with God. It's sacred. It has to be hidden away. It is the most valuable object that you have. The second is the fetish, which is much more private. It's typically it's valuable jewelry. It's the thing you feel like you want to keep it close to you. Could be a souvenir as well. Something you say, okay, this reminds me of the most happy moment in my life. A wedding ring is a fetish. It's a part object. Something attached to your body. And then the totem is the object that you care about because it connects you with other people. It's the community image. So one of my favorite metapictures in this whole array is the golden calf. Where is it? I think it's
this one.
Is that it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is.
Okay, this is Poussin's great painting in the National Gallery in London.
Yeah.
And I have been puzzling over this painting for a long time because there it is. An image has just been created by the artist, Aaron, right here, Moses' brother. And how did he make it? He told all the Israelites, bring me all your gold jewelry, all the things you value most, and I will melt them down and make an image to go before us. This will be an image of our collective identity. And why does he do this? Well, because Moses has been gone for 40 days and 40 nights. So Moses is their leader. What are they going to do when they don't have a leader? Well, I say we have to have something. The word they use is to go before us. And some of them say, make us a god to go before us, because they think Moses is their god. And so Moses is gone. We need something new to go before us. It's like when an army needs to have a standard. The Roman army had eagles, and each eagle represented a unit of the army, a legion. So this is like the legion image for the Israelites. It's made up, the material is made up of all of the fetish objects, the jewelry of the Israelites. So, but Moses is coming down the mountain. There's Moses, and he is smashing the tablets. And he's smashing it because he's just had a conversation with God about the golden calf. And God has said, do you see what this people have been doing while you were away? They have made an idol. And he said, I'm very angry. I'm going to wipe them all out. And Moses argues with him. I recommend reading Exodus 32. It is the most terrifying passage in the entire book of Exodus. And it's also quite funny because Moses actually argues with God. He says, what are people going to say about you? That you brought this people out of Egypt, you liberated them from captivity, and now you're going to wipe them all out? And so God says, okay, you handle it. And so Moses does. He comes out and he says, all right, all of you who were involved in worshiping this calf, you go over there. Everybody who properly hates and despises the calf, you come with me. And he wipes out half of his own people. So instead of destroying them utterly, they only half get killed. He seems to overlook the fact that Aaron, his own brother, is the one who made the calf. It's one of the strangest stories I've ever heard, and it's why I'm an atheist. If you're going to believe in this kind of morality about images coming out of a religion whose most important commandment, the one that seems to rule them, is don't ever make images of anything. The second commandment. It's like the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Completely crazy law. The law against images. No one has ever been able to obey it, and yet it is enforced with the death penalty in this story. So I better stop before I get into a very long sermon about religion here. But and by the way, I don't know of any art historian, especially specialists on Poussin, who agrees with this reading. But maybe they do. Michaela, do you know someone?
I would like to ask you something if nobody is ready to. Okay, just about this picture. And so you have put in your wonderful book on what we just want, a table with our behavior toward images, idolatry, dogmatism, fetishism. I have seen the table on the screen. And my question is, after this wonderful idea that we have always the same behavior toward images, I mean Homo sapiens in this case, there is a long story, Philippe de Scola has 4 ontologies: naturalism, totemism, fetishism, and so on. So this is really one of the most important points in modern visual culture. If I were Marshall Salins, I would say, okay, you are an Hegelian, so with 3, and of course the Scola is a post-structuralist, so a structuralist with 4 behaviors. Are you still thinking that these are really 3 behaviors, or are you ready to accept that we can work on this idea of our behaviors, trying to find, for example, only one approach to images for Homo sapiens, for example, animistic approaches. So we have to have a contact with living images. This is what we need at the end as species, so to say. For me, it's very interesting in my mental history of visual culture to know about the evolution, eventually, of course, evolution of these three points: idolatry, dottorism, fetishism. Have you new thoughts on this subject, or are you eventually ready to accept that we can work on these three Hegelian? Yes, this is the table, you know, it's a wonderful table, not only for the three idolatry, fetishism, and totem, but what you say about the economic and political aspects of these things is, of course, Mitchell, so to say. But you see, you write type of animated icon, idol, fetish, totem. So at the end, is it possible that we have, as Homo sapiens, only an animistic attitude to images? I would like to hear your opinion now after this wonderful.
Well, it's as I think you've seen. We all know that animism toward images is wrong. I guess, you know, I think if anybody, are there any animists who want to defend their position here? We are modern secular intellectuals. We are skeptical. We have read Hegel, or we've read about him. So we know better. And I want to say the beautiful and mysterious thing about images is, even though we know better, then we always say, and yet, at the same time, there is a hesitation. So I don't think we get over some form of animism. We might get over it in principle, but in practice, we don't. And we're always discovering something we care about, something that affects us, that returns us to that fundamental animism, without ever, at the same time, it's what Freud called disavowal, double consciousness. And I think is there any other kind of consciousness besides double consciousness? You are all conscious of at this moment where you are, what's going on here, but you're also all self-conscious, especially when you stand up to ask a question. At that moment, the consciousness changes. And I have stood up, I am seen. And it's why all of us are shy in a situation like this. I've gotten used to it. I'm just brazen because I'm in front of you. But if you stand up, then suddenly everybody looks at you and listens to what you have to say. So it's built into our consciousness, I think, doubleness. And images constantly reveal that to us. So maybe another question?
Another question? Yes,
Yeah.
please. Two questions. Is okay for you?
No.
Or are they
Yeah.
too much?
No.
No, okay.
Please keep it coming.
Please.
If you allow me, and ask you about a specific type of images, which is the photographic image. And I want to ask you, would I be wrong if I consider the photographic image as a meta picture, that is a picture that tells us at the same time about itself and also about the way we see images, or the way we have already images in our minds that we want to see in the photograph? And is it also a multi-stable image where the center of our attention would shift from the subject of the image to the creator, to the receiver? For me, the photographic image is an enigma because it says a lot and it hides a lot, and I do not really know how am I supposed to approach it. Of course, you have warned us not to idealize maybe images, not to, let's say, not to look at them as idols, but it's very hard in front of a photographic image, at least for me, my experience, very humble experience, not to feel love, but also at the same time fear, sometimes anger, and sometimes hatred. When I am exposed to certain photographic images that do not only tell me about what other people see, but they tell me something about myself. They expose me in a way. They expose some images about me that I do not want to see. So I just want to hear your opinion about this and about photography specifically. And thank you very much again.
Okay. Yeah, I think it is an essential question because images are not all of the same kind. There's sculpture, painting, graffiti, the casual mark or impression, but photography produced a revolution in the world of images. There were already prints and multiple images. And of course, I'm sure you all know Walter Benjamin's classic essay on mechanical reproduction and how photography changes the world by making copies of impressions, an indefinite number of them. That goes back as far as coinage. Roman coins are mentioned, but also engraving, etching, the whole history of making multiple images. The thing that is magical about photography is its relation to time, that it is the record of a moment, that it is instantaneous in its capturing of a reality, and that it's a product of cause and effect. It's an index, not just an icon, but something that was caused by the thing you see in it. So the idea that a photograph could capture the soul is and when people have not been used to photography, there can be a phobia about being photographed. Please don't take a photograph of me. If you take a photograph of me, you take away something of me. This was also true, by the way, of drawing. There's a wonderful book by an artist writer named George Catlin, who traveled among the Native Americans in the West and made some of the first drawings of Native Americans. One day, he was drawing pictures of Native warriors with their feather headdresses, and he drew a picture in profile. And the Indian chief who appeared in profile said, "I like it very much." And one of his rivals said, "He's only painted half of your face. So he has defaced you. And they got into a fight, and one of them died. So the image as a transcript of the real, of something that is a copy, has always had that magical thing. But the photograph produced a new level of that. The idea that it would capture you. We talk about capturing a likeness as if it was a wild creature that we were trying to snare. And I think we also need to remember photography itself is not one simple thing. It has a history, a fairly recent history in terms of the invention of the camera and the printing process, chemical process that goes with it. But then there is our time, in which none of you, Is anybody here carrying a chemical-based camera with them? Probably not. You all have your cell phone, which is also your camera, which is purely digital. The images, so much easier to take pictures, thousands of them. What is the relation of those pictures? Are they the same as the chemical-based? What transformation in our image culture occurred because of the digitization of photography? Back in the 1990s, there was an argument. There was a book by a man named William J. Mitchell, who I was often, people would write to me and say, why did you write this book? And I didn't write it. It was
The other Mitchell.
the other Mitchell. And the argument of the book was that the digitization of images meant you could no longer trust them. They were too easy to manipulate and fake. And at first, when I read this, I thought, yes, he has a point. It's a point. But then I began to be skeptical. And is it really the case we don't trust the digital images? Do we suspect them all that somebody is manipulating them, making them? I personally have, if I tried to manipulate one of the photographs on my phone, I would probably screw it up completely. I have no skill at doing that. You have to develop a whole skill to do that. The normal average use of those photographs is in many ways the same. We say, yes, that's a picture. I took this picture yesterday in Palermo, and I didn't have to wait till I came home. I could send it to you. I could put it on Facebook, on the cloud. That's where the difference is. The digital image, or at least one of the differences, is the digital image circulates so much more quickly, instantaneous, all over the planet. Not true of the chemical base. So I began to think the idea that you can't trust the photograph, maybe there is some truth to it, but I don't think it's the major truth. I think much more important is circulation, speed of transmission, the multiplication of many more, the number of photographs, just quantitatively much greater. At the same time, I think they still carry all of those, potentially, all those magic animistic connotations that have been there with images all along. So in that sense, they just continue a very long history that goes back to the golden calf. One other thing on the question of reliability, in the Metapictures Atlas, there is a video. I don't want to take time to show it to you. It's several minutes long, but it's from a film by the great documentary filmmaker Errol Morris, who made a film about the photographs, all digital, which were taken by American soldiers at Abu Ghraib prison in the autumn of 2003. He took, and these were Iraqi prisoners who were being tortured in an American prison. Very shameful episode in American history. Were those photographs faked? Not at all. They were very reliable. They told the truth, and that truth came out, and it was deeply embarrassing to the U.S. government. Not embarrassing enough, in my view. It could have been worse. Should have been. What Morris showed, though, is that the claim of reality, of realism, and the idea that the photo is a trace of the real, an index, is reinforced in the digital image. It's not dissipated, because when you take a digital image, you're not only taking an image, you're also taking a whole body of other pieces of information: the time, the day, the setting on your camera, And now where you were, your operating system in your phone is automatically gathering your images into days, weeks,
People.
places, people. So metadata comes with the digital image. I think that's just an amazing fact about them. With the old, the chemical-based photo, there was a lot of nostalgia. Oh, this is the real. This is a real thing. This is nothing but pixels. Well, our eyes get very used to pixels, just as they did to chemical-based colors. And the digital photograph carries much more information. To include that information with a chemical-based photo, you had to write on the back of the picture, or you had to keep a notebook like a professional. Very difficult to have metadata with a chemical-based photo. It's automatic with the digital. So, and who knows where it'll go next? I mean, by the time you're my age, then maybe we'll be carrying around holograms. Certainly in science fiction films, they've already projected the idea that we could take a moving picture of a scene and then not project it on a screen or a wall, but let it come alive in a space in a room where we sit around it. That would be a futuristic phase. Maybe you'll see that.
And by the way, also chemical photographs were manipulable.
Of course, yeah.
Margherita?
And a PhD student. I want to thank you for the lecture yesterday because I was very interested because of the connection of traditional elements from the ancient Rome and the political subject. Because as I told you just a few moments ago, I studied the triumph is an engram, what Abibar calls engram, something that returns many times during the history, and I'm obsessed with this kind of image. It's like something that we saw multiple times. So my question is about political ecology and about power, like duo of violence and force. How can we use the image as a political operator, an instrument to analyze the reality and the power? Thank you.
Well, it's I think a central question for, why are we even thinking about this? Why do you care about images? Why are you studying visual culture? Certainly, one aspect of it is because they are forces. They are factors in not just our personal individual reality, but in social and political reality. The first thing I think of to address your question is some of the images I was showing yesterday, and particularly the images of January 6th, all photographic or televisual images. Probably, in the history of image technology, this may have been the most photographed event in a very long time. Another one was the World Trade Center destruction. And I don't mean only to mention American examples, but that's what I know best. One reason the World Trade Center was photographed so completely and by so many people from so many angles is it happened twice. There was 18 minutes between the first impact and the second impact. So it was as if, I think of it as if you get a stick in your eye and you begin to worry, and then your other eye pays attention. That was what happened with the World Trade Center. And it was an act of iconoclasm, of course, the destruction of the World Trade Center and the idea of the U.S. as the dominant economic power on the planet. With January 6th, it was a prolonged televisual event, which, and of course, it's hard to forget the behavior of the most powerful man in the U.S. at the time it was happening. He did nothing except watch television. In fact, it's been strange to me. How is watching television potentially a crime? Well, if you should be doing something else, if you should be not watching television, but getting on television, every advisor, his own family, coming into the White House drawing room saying, Dad, you have to get out there. You have to say, call it off. It's going too far. He said, don't bother me. He sat and watched television. So it's as far as I know, it's the first time in history where it might be criminal behavior just to sit and watch television when you are somebody who's expected to do a lot more. I showed you the image, what I think of as the icon of the event yesterday, with the Capitol and the crowd storming the steps. The Capitol is almost flooded completely with bodies. And it's punctuated by all kinds of symbols. You could spend hours, I have, studying those images, looking for, because it was a deliberate spectacle. They knew they were creating an image. They were attacking an image. The architecture of the Capitol it's an icon itself. It's not just a building. It has three parts: a head, the dome, and then two wings. And the idea, the symbolism of the U.S. Capitol, it's been imitated. State capitals in every state of the Union, sometimes little tiny ones, like in Carson City, Nevada, where I grew up, they have exactly the same structure: two wings and a dome. Why is that? Well, because you have a legislative branch and the Senate. You divide the legislature in two. They have different powers, different responsibilities, but they are supposed to. The legislative branch of the government is epitomized in the Capitol. The White House is that's where the temporary sovereign resides. It's a residence, but it's a temporary residence until the most recent occupant who said, "No, I'm not leaving. I'm going to stay forever." So it's about reason and argument and resolution. The dome, I think, is the resolution, with bringing together the thinking, the arguing, including differences of opinion, strong arguments for and against something, but then coming together in a democratic union. It's an image of the res publica, the rule of the public, of the citizen. And here it is, immersed in a mob, filled with symbols of fascism, civil war, and the cult of personality around one man. So I think one of our big jobs as iconologists or students of images is to pay attention to these images wherever we find them and interpret them, to try to make them intelligible. Ask, how do they affect us? What do they bring into the open? Maybe it was hidden. Certainly, this made very visible, spectacularly visible, a deep contradiction in the American people. That's why I compared it to Rome and the barbarian invasions, which were rather different. Here's Rome, and here are the barbarians coming from outside. With the US, that image, the barbarians are coming from inside. They are, they both look like barbarians, and particularly the image I close with, the QAnon shaman. It was as if he dressed up for the occasion with a kind of a Native American costume, the bull with the horns, body covered with Nazi tattoos, and a spear. A very sinister image. And this is this guy, well, he has a whole story of his own, which I won't go into. So yes, the politics is all about images. And one of our jobs, I think, as image scientists is to study them, analyze them, critique them, figure out what they mean.